Happy Tuesday, everybody.
Jam.
It is another show on Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim GK, and I'm joined by Mr. Quentin Bedwell.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the That Silverline Show on Tuesday. And just remember, no matter what kind of day you have, remember there's always a silver line. Like silver lining. Get it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It fell. It dropped. It's okay.
Right.
It's all right.
I think it works.
No, that's good. I like that one.
I feel like if our title's any indication, our entire brand is the no sale comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
Yes. Yep. And also Mr. Aaron Humphreys.
Hello. I was doing something online really quick. I was doing something with the Obsoletes, which is a comic I'm working on for Silverline.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm also the artist in Fire Rush, and then I join you guys online to talk about nerd things, I guess.
Nerd things, creative nerd things.
That's right.
Yeah, we're gonna get a little deeper into the nerd sauce, talking about the actual process and how you might make the process happen. You're gonna metagame our creative process.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
How to actually bring it about, to go from implementation to completion, to complete our stuff. Yes.
The world knows plenty of people who say they want to write or draw a comic, but hopefully we can give you some tips on actually getting the flow to actually write or draw that comic. But as always, we're going to start off light and breezy with our icebreaker. So, Quentin, what have you been reading, watching, playing, listening to this week?
Well, I watched a little more Expanse. I haven't finished it. I am 2 episodes away from completing this last season. Did you say they were having another season after this one, or is this it?
The season they put up this year was the last one.
Oh, okay.
There is more content in the books, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, other than that,
I have 6 of them lined up on my shelf behind me.
That's it. I've done a little bit of decorating. Ba-bam!
Nice.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Finally got those guys out and together, I should say. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool. Did you make the background?
I actually ordered that offline and on Amazon. And where I just thought, man, that would look so good with my Galactus. Galactus. My Galactus will not fit in the Detolf shelf, so I had to figure out something different for him, and that worked out pretty good, I think. So
yeah, it looks cool.
Other than that, I've been so busy at work. I've barely drawn this week. I'm finishing up the inking on the commission that I was working on. And I'm about to do some more little commissions here and there. So that's about it. No consumption of any media or much. Just been watching the news and working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Still almost done with Neo. The second one. I keep playing that, and every time I'm almost done, they're like, when you look online and see how much left you have to go, like, 2 more whatever level. So started watching Raised by Wolves.
Oh yeah.
I think I'm starting the 4th episode soon.
Yeah.
I like it so far. I think the second season, I don't know if the second season ended on a cliffhanger or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that they did confirm there's going to be more happening with that IP.
Is there going to be more? Okay.
Yeah.
So far I like it. I've been reading. I reread The Crow.
Yes.
Which Jose really likes. I like that one. It's been years since I've read it, so it was kind of interesting to read. It's still as powerful as when I first read it. I mean, it's a powerful story. Been rereading. You would know this, Tim, the X-Force series that went into Ecstatic when Mike Allred took over, and then he put it into Ecstatic and stuff. My friend loaned me those, and so I read the first one of those because I've always been curious to read Ecstatic.
Yeah.
I never read it, and I know what came out of X-Force. It was like, and then Ecstatic, I think, was like it's one like sort of series, and then it just kind of ended.
It was one of the ideas where they wanted to do kind of like a one and done subtitle, like they sometimes do.
Yeah.
My favorite of those being, of course, being X Club, because it is just weird. It's an acid trip.
Is it?
Posing to science. Yeah.
Well, I used to read Mike Howard's like Madman and stuff, so it's
Oh, yeah.
interesting. So far, I mean, there's parts of it that are okay, and there's parts of it I like. It's getting more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I read the second volume. Now, of course, I think I looked up like the omnibus or whatever for Ecstatic, and it's pricey. I mean, it's
Yeah.
out of print, obviously. So
Yeah.
either something I have to try to hunt down through the library, maybe I can find a way to read them online or something if I want to read them. So.
Yeah. Yeah, for a lot of like the older stuff now, it feels kind of dirty, but I do have to recommend people just like go like Marvel Unlimited, or get even better at get your Comixology Unlimited subscription, because it includes indies.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a Cosmicology subscription. I didn't think Marvel was on there.
It is. If it's on
It
Marvel Unlimited, it's on Comixology Unlimited. Same with the DC Universe.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I have a subscription that had it for a while, so maybe I'll just go in there and read it. Because I know it's only like 12 or 15 issues. It's not that big of a series. It was, one omnibus.
Yeah.
That's a little more like, I can read that instead of like getting into like a whole nother series. But I did know it came out of X-Force, and people really liked it.
Yeah.
So far, I mean, Mike Howard's artwork is always interesting. He's the classic cartoonist sort of stuff. Yeah, movies I haven't really like. I think I told you I saw the Batman.
Yes.
Is it called? It was called The Batman, right?
This is the Batman.
Yeah. I really haven't watched any movies or whatever. I've been kind of just working on the obsoletes, and like I said, trying to like I'm finishing deals. Like everyone's like, "Oh, we're playing Elden Ring and all this," and I'm like, "I'm trying to finish these other games. Slow down. I can't keep up with all that." So, yeah. And then they just put that Guardians of the Galaxy game on Game Pass, and I'm like, well, I guess I'll have to try that too now.
Oh, yeah.
So whatever.
Ain't good.
I have no idea, but it's free technically.
I've heard really good things about it. I've heard. I think XPlay gave it like 4 to 5, almost going on 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a pretty story-driven game, and it's funny because I would think since it was a team you could switch characters, because it's a one-player game, and I thought you could play all the characters, but you don't. You just play Star-Lord.
You play Star-Lord, and it works kind of like a co-op action adventure, in that you're calling in your teammates to do certain things.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll call in like Drax to do an ability, and then you call in Gamora to do an ability, and time those up to do like certain effects and stuff.
Yeah. I think it was Square Enix made it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
And so they said it was good. I don't know why it didn't sell well, which kind of was surprising. I mean, in other words, I remember that game going down in price pretty fast. And I don't know. I mean, it didn't sell well, whatever, because I thought it looked okay. It was just there were other games at the time I wanted to buy than that. But now it's on Game Pass. It's like, well, I mean, it's not really an excuse. I can download it, whatever.
Right. Might as well play it. Yeah. I think honestly, I think the problem is that a lot of people in the creative space and like younger really value single player games, because you can get a lot of content of it, and you get like a lot of like a really like rich and deep experience. But for your average schmo, you probably don't have enough time to like dedicate to like sit down sessions. So having a game the reason why like my love to Destiny is always topping Steam charts is something you can get on for like an hour or 2 hours a week, get your little bit of a grind on, and then get out. Yeah.
I've always liked single player games. I grew up on them. Just because I've always liked like puzzles and stuff, and you get more puzzles in those sort of like the whole game is kind of figuring stuff out. But again, it was funny because single player games are the ones that were short, and now over the years, I mean, average like 60 hours, 40 hours. I mean,
it's like 40 hours. Yeah. So I think, I always loved like narrative-driven games. Originally, that's what I like wanted to do. Was originally-ish was when I heard about the program that I ended up going to school for, was like, oh, they offer like game writing courses, and then I went there and I'm like, actually writing comics is a lot more fulfilling for me, so I'm going to go back to that.
And strangely enough, it is, because it's directly focused on the story. I mean, game writing is focused on the story, but the gameplay usually oversees it. Unless it's like an RPG or something.
I do like making the occasional like Twine meme game, or like some sort of like text-based games, like just doing really kind of memey pseudo dating sims, or interactive novels, like
something.
I famously have a game out that's circulating that is a Shia LaBeouf based dating sim.
Well, I'm all over that. I mean, that guy's amazing. Yeah. I'm just gonna do it. He did kind of, I wonder his thoughts on like when he made that Just Do It video. I mean, did he really think people weren't going to make fun of that? I mean, this is the end.
I don't know if he knew like the full extent is going to go through, because it was part of a college's film program. They gave they allowed people to like in art school to essentially to write like short bits that he would improvise on or that he would act out, and then they would edit in the green screen or whatever. So I was working as like the film students could do something, the writing students could do something, and then the editing students could do something. And so then the raw footage just made its way to YouTube. And
because it's just like, so basically it was almost like, was he supposed to be serious, or was it like more of a tongue-in-cheek thing that he knew he was being goofy, or maybe, I don't know.
For some, I think it was a little tongue-in-cheek, but it was like, it literally there was like 30 minutes of that stuff, because it's a bunch of different ones where he was just like asked to like film different scenes. So there's a bunch of them, but Just Do It one is the one that blew up, of course.
I mean, what can you say? It's kind of a classic.
It's just so simple and aggressive without any context to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
for myself, I also just watched The Batman on Saturday, and I'm a bit more on Roland's side of things.
You liked it?
I liked it a lot. I thought it for me, it did feel a lot more like a Detective Batman. So for me, and also I love Robert Pattinson, and like the stranger the role he can get into, it makes sense. And for me, Batman always seemed as a neurotic, maladjusted, somewhat narcissistic dude. So
I thought I just thought the detective bits weren't well written.
I felt they came through, but the problem is that it translates the way like a traditional war story does. So if you like a lot of traditional war, that's really sells it. But like if you like modern day procedural, it feels a little different.
It just felt like so much stuff was kind of handed to him.
I didn't get that at all, actually, because
I thought maybe I was the only one. Like, am I reading this wrong? But some of the people online said the same thing. So I mean, I don't know.
I felt like everyone had their purpose. That like there weren't anyone who was like a dead character. It wasn't like Commissioner Gordon didn't feel like he was just there to ask questions. He was offering input, but then Batman was the one actually doing the extrapolation to find the right answer.
Yeah.
So I felt like everyone was good at offering input. So maybe it's just been a little, for some people, it might have just been too much input from the other characters. But I liked it. I thought Christian Bale was a really great Dark Knight, but for me, this feels more like the Detective Comics Batman.
Yeah, I'm not saying there were parts of that movie I was just like, wait, what? But I mean, I'm like I said to them, I'm used to people hating my movies. I like the Snyderverse. Everybody hates those, so I don't care.
Sure.
But yeah.
I love the.
I actually love. I bought the figures based on just the Snyderverse because I finally watched it and I was like, wow, this is really awesome. And I ended up buying the figures, whereas before I was not the least bit interested just because of what I'd already consumed.
Yeah.
And, I actually went out and like, man, I've got to have these. This is like, no, thousands may disagree, but this is for me, comic history, movie history.
I thought it's a bummer because there were supposed to be 2 other movies, supposed to be 5 parts.
Mm-hmm.
So like the scene where like Cyborg has he's activating the ship and like the thing is showing him scenes of like Superman holding the skeleton and like Aquaman being killed. Those are all supposed to happen in the sequel movies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we'll never get to see it.
Yeah.
I don't see why they just don't animate them. Like I'd be happy they ended Justice League enough that you could technically, it's like whatever, but it'd be cool to see it fulfilled. The Batman, I think I liked his car a lot. I liked him as Batman. That was just, it always felt like me, like Batman should be 2 or 3 steps ahead of his enemies, and it always felt like he was like a few steps back. Like the Riddler was winning through the whole film, and I'm like, that's usually he's the one, and that's what. And also, of course, one guy pointed out a flaw in the very beginning of the movie that I can't overlook now, and I wish I could. I wish he didn't point it out, but he pointed out. I'm like, oh man.
For me, the Riddler was always the one who had the chance of outthinking Batman, because I always view Batman's villains as having one aspect they could do better. Like, of course, the big 3 have Joker is just pure chaos. So when you have someone who's pure order, like they don't mesh well. So for him, it's always come over. Bane is the person who can always out punch Batman, and Riddler's the guy who could always outthink Batman. And I thought it was really interesting how this is like kind of a weird departure from Comics Riddler, who was sometimes Comics Riddler seems like he'd be more inclined to be if things were a little different, if circumstances were slightly changed, Comics Riddler could almost be more of a hero and Batman would be more of a villain if like they just adjusted to the circumstances a little bit more differently. Because having a bit more of a murder-friendly Riddler, I felt worked well with the movie.
I mean, I said, I didn't think the movie, was. There was just certain things that I don't know. It just wasn't clicking. Visually, it looked great. But I mean,
also art is subjective.
It just wasn't for you, is what you're saying, Aaron.
Yeah, I don't know.
And art's subjective. So for me, it's whereas like I don't like the the Snyder cut as much, but other people love it. So I mean, everyone gets their own bit of it, and I think it's. I like also. I do like the idea of having multiple Batman film universes because we get that in comics already. So.
Oh yeah, and I don't. I mean, there was just little. I mean, he started out when he figured out like the thumb drive. That's like you mentioned. I'm like, okay, that's okay. But he just seemed like he kind of just figured out the one thing I wish they would have done is the riddles didn't really some led, but some didn't really lead anywhere. It was like he figured it out, and I'm like, and that means. And that was just a flaw in the writing. I mean, it was just like, and I think that was, and I don't think it was. I just think it was like, and. The one scene, if anyone's not seen it, I will try to keep this as.
Nah, go ahead.
Has it been 2 weeks? I think it's been about 2 weeks.
It's been
It's time.
When the Penguin actually corrects him on the El Rata thing, I was like, oh come on. I mean, I was like, seriously, like and Batman's like, oh really? And I was like, okay, that was a little like.
That was a little weird, but also...
Yeah, I was like... The other one... Okay, so what the guy pointed out was like... when they first showed the pictures of the mayor and the girl walking out of the bar, he was like, any good detective would try to figure out where that shot was taken from. And I'm like, that's good. And they were like, and if he would have figured out where that shot was taken from, he would have found the Riddler in the beginning. And I'm like...
Yeah.
And after seeing that, I'm like, I can't unsee that. Like, that is like Detective 101. And I'm like, okay, that's really bad. And really, why did you point that out? Because now I cannot unsee that flaw. Like, he was there. I mean, all you had to do was like, here was the place. The photo was, we'll look at an apartment. And like, and I was like, and I can't unsee it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I'm like, why did he point that out? But now it's like obvious in my face. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I thought he was a cool man. He was visually cool, and I liked the way his presence was, and I liked the fact that he was kind of unhinged, like all you said about that. There was just some weird stuff, the way they wrote the detective parts, where I was like, I was waiting for that scene, and they kind of did it a little bit, where he was like, have everything spread out. He's putting the pieces together.
Yeah.
But they really didn't do that, and I was like, I don't know. So it did feel like a Batman story, but it felt like to me like it was as close as they can get, but not there for me quite.
Sure.
Yet. That's what it felt like. It just needed a few more, like he needed to have that aha moment or like catch, but like the Riddler just got away with everything, and I was just like, well, what a detective. So yeah, I don't know. The other thing that was really strange to me is when he escaped the police department and everyone was shooting him, and then the next scene he's with the cops and they're all okay again. I'm like, wouldn't they? So now the cops are like, oh yeah, that's totally cool. And he's hanging out with us again. I'm like, when you just shooting this guy like an hour or so ago, and now you're like, well, yeah, but that was an hour ago. We're okay now. I'm just like, okay, I'm trying to put that together because I thought like, okay, now he's on the run from the cops. That's going to be cool. But they completely just disregarded that storyline. Okay, that's.
I think the next scene is when he gets with the cops. It goes to that to the coming out of the lounge with Falcone, and I think at that point he has the right to be like, I was right. You can all shut up now.
It was still, but I mean, I don't know. It just seemed. It seemed like. I don't know. It seemed really weird. I was like, they added that element, and then they just promptly kind of like. And I still cannot figure out how Catwoman missed shooting him in the dark. She had him did the right. She turned the lights off, and all of a sudden, she's like shooting at the ceiling. I'm like,
that's something that like anyone who's like operated like a firearm knows. Like, I will take anyone. I'll fight anyone untrained with a firearm over anyone not trained with a sword anytime because they're not going to account for recoil. They're not going to account for adjustment or anything. Like they're going to shoot once, like way off sides, and be completely useless. Where if someone's just swinging the sword willy nilly, like you can't account for that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, there was. It was just one of those. And usually, I'm pretty okay forgiving with movies. Comic book movies, Batman movies, I get a little more because Batman still reaches a little more towards realism, a little bit because he's a real guy.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, this is supposed to take place in kind of like the real world per se, as long as as you can believe a guy dressing as a bat or whatever. So I kind of pay attention to more realism. When stuff like that, I pay attention to like in Marvel movies, Superman. It's like, no, they got superpowers, so I mean, whatever. Okay. But Batman, I was like, no, it's cooler when it is a little more realistic. That's why I like Christian Bale stuff. But I really liked how he explained the suit because you're like, why does he have a cape? And it's like, oh, well, because he can. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I like that. Like that. Okay, so I'm like, okay, I'm. This is kind of cool. His whole suit is like this sort of whole unifying functional suit with the wings and the ears, like that you could hear. And I'm like, that's really cool. So yeah, that's right. Yeah. But I'm not going to say he was the greatest detective in the Christopher Nolan ones either. He did a little bit of detective work. There's much more detective work in here. Somebody said it was very much Seven. The movie Seven and Batman. And I was like, I can see that. Because in the movie Seven, the detectives kind of led the whole way. And they didn't solve it. The guy won. And somebody said, this is how the Riddler won. I'm like, oh, yeah, I kind of see that.
Yeah, but definitely. It was like, and it definitely feels like the Riddler being able to get like that last little riddle and felt very Frank Miller Batman too. Yeah, and like it was being based off of like year two. I had that also. I felt the influence of Miller in there.
I was kind of hoping they would do straight up more of. I would love to see the straight take on the Long Halloween. I mean, they kind of had some influences, but I really liked that story. And I mean, the animated movie I thought was pretty decent too. But like if they did the straight up the Long Halloween, I thought that was a great, dope. Great story. Yeah, and they were kind of doing that at the beginning, but I liked him that he was kind of like putting things together and stuff. There was just some things. And he pointed out that photograph. I'm like, why did you do that?
Right.
No, I cannot unsee that.
Yeah, definitely. I see that too. Reading wise, I've been reading The Case of the General's Thumb.
Is that a historical?
It's it's kind of historical fiction, but not really. It's it's actually written by a Ukrainian author, so it's kind of timely. But it's just post Cold War, and it follows a member of the essentially the Ukrainian Citizens Militia, which essentially is like they're from like the military police.
Okay.
And he's investigating the death of an advisor to the president, a military advisor to the president, who was found hanging from I think he was hanging from a weather balloon with his thumb missing. And so it's kind of a dark comedy with him, and then his counterpoint is a kind of strung along FSB agent who is supposed to be like reporting back to Moscow what's happening in Ukraine in the city, but he's too caught up in like this fisherman he's friends with, and his wife's trying to move into the city, and he can't really do his job because he's just very bad at it. But whereas the other guy is perhaps too good at his job, but so his family life is suffering a lot. So their counterplay is very funny. It's also very realistic in that you had half the time the detectives are sleeping on cars or in couches, and everyone is way too sleep deprived, caffeinated, or drunk to really do anything besides follow. So it's a good read.
It's a book, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Have you been reading any comics, or mostly just books lately?
I bounce back and forth. I need to. I bounced up and caught up a little bit more on Department of Truth, which I still think is like one of the best ongoing series right now.
That's Image, right?
Yep, Image written by James Tynion. The first volume has some really great. If you like watercolor art, like the first volume has really great watercolor art. And now they get into like sound like 90s style designs in the second one, and then they change again going into the third one. But I think it almost by design they wanted to get different artists for each volume because they deal with the idea of subjective reality, like as the masses believe, so reality changes.
Okay.
And so the Department of Truth is like, okay, this is like the one consistent timeline that we need people to believe in, otherwise things get messy.
So it's almost kind of like a Tulpa thing. Like the more
Yeah.
people believe, the more things come. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so like it's like they have a thing where like people are believing that like there's a colony of lizard people in Antarctica, so they have to go to Antarctica and remove the lizard people, and then and then like bring like documented like photos of like there's no lizard people in Antarctica. Everyone calm down.
Did you? You know, that reminds me. Did you ever read? It was connected to the Authority. It wasn't the Authority. It was the one. It was the three guys that were like historical, almost investigators. Planetary.
Ooh, I think like it's been on my list. I just haven't had a chance to read through it yet.
You'd probably like that. Just listening to you talk, Truth reminded me. I have that book. I should read that again. It's been a while. I had that book in there, and it's kind of like it's one complete. I think that's Warren Ellis, but I'm not sure. He wrote also the Authority. The first Authority book I really liked, and then I read the second one, and it was a little too. Usually things aren't too violent, but I don't know. I just didn't click with me. That was the guy who did Kick Ass and stuff. I can't think of his name right now. The first one was written by Brett, and the first one, Authority, it ties in the Planetary kind of because you just kind of read it as one story. I mean, they didn't really need to make a sequel. But both of them are really good. I should read those again. It was when you're telling me, like, you know, the way the Department of Truth and they're figuring the lizard people, that's the kind of stuff they do. Like, they have a story in there where, like, the whole Superman thing happens. And, like, the Planetary people are, like, I think they're almost like a think tank or something that goes to these. So they actually cover a lot of, like, comic tropes, like the baby Superman arrives, and then but it's their take on, like, what would these people do, and they like go through and record history and certain events. I think one of them is like immortal or something, but it's kind of fascinating. Really well done series.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's dope. That's dope. All right. Well, we're about 30 minutes in, so we can get started on tonight's subject, and that is the creative workflow. So this is something that was covered in, you know, probably your BFA or MFA program if you went through one. It's also covered a lot in business programs, the idea of the state of flow, the point in which you are essentially you're not actively thinking about the creative process. It's just kind of happening through you. So this is the process that leads to us staying up far too late and looking at the clock. Like, I've been working on this page for 3 hours now. And of course there's also the idea of workflow itself, which we may get into at some point, which is, you know, the actual beats in your process of getting project, completing project, sending off project, getting notes, doing those back and forth, and tools there. But more so we're going to be talking about the creative lifestyle that involves, you know, your workflow or how your flow works around your lifestyle or vice versa. Sometimes I know some people who let their lifestyle dictate their flow, and so they find like they have like very hard set times where this is their creative time. And I know some people who let their creative workflow dictate their lifestyle, and that it's impossible to get hold of them because they're always putting something out. And then so kind of open up the floor for any kind of discussion about your own states of flow, what kind of helps you, what your flow looks like.
I work in it most of the time. I don't know if this has to do with flow, but most of my stories are pretty well written out beforehand. So a lot of times when I'm making my stories, I'm pretty much just doing. I mean, I do change things as I go along, my personal stuff.
Yeah.
As far as working on like the obsoletes, like I pretty much start working, and it's as so many times I'll wake up like I'm gonna wake up and. You know, certain days I get to work early, and then I just end up already starting like at 8-9 o'clock at night. I don't know. I just have to get stuff done during the day, and it just.
I try to be a morning worker, but I cannot. Like evening for sure. Like some people describe themselves like morning people or night owls. Like I am a solid like mid-afternoon cat, like 2 to 4 peak productivity.
Yeah, I've tried the morning. It's but like late at night and stuff. Because I when I do my other job, I work from home too. So. But during the day, I'm always like running errands or whatever, and then my house quiets down, and I can, because I have other people I live with, and I can get to work. So yeah, it's. But I've tried like I'm gonna get stuff during the day so I can have the night off. It never happens.
Yeah,
never happens.
I'm definitely a post 8 o'clock guy because my kids go to sleep then.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's finally when and wife too. And that's when I can finally get in the zone, stay in the zone, and not be
100%.
interrupted and be, uh, other than that, I mean, I try whenever I can, but, and mainly it's going to be on Mondays and Tuesdays.
Mhm.
And that's my biggest work time. If I miss those, then I try to get it. I try to make up for it during the week sometime, but that doesn't happen a lot. Like if I don't get that Monday and Tuesday, then it's probably not going to happen. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
kind of what happened this week. I had to this past week, actually the past 2 weeks, I've just had to draw so much at work,
Oh,
so
yeah.
much custom stuff that I actually had to put pen to paper. By the time I got off, I was just too exhausted
You're
to do
already
anything.
already starting on the burnout just from your day
Yeah,
job.
already spent. So I would just find something else to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I kind of got a couple questions coming off that, but the first one is, so do you guys find that you work better in like, I mean, we're talking about like house noises, and obviously like we all live with people in our households,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
uh, I find that I can't work well in complete silence, but I also can't work with people noise.
Yeah.
Like for me, like I have some pretty gnarly tinnitus, so I always need some sort of music or something going. Otherwise, all I hear is raining. But if I hear people noises, that just is too distracting for me.
Yeah. Well, you're writing, so that's a little different.
Yeah.
Right? So
Sure.
with drawing, once I get my pencils down, my shapes, it's mechanical after that.
Mm.
It's pretty mechanical. Like then I'm just kind of arting in the rest.
Yeah.
Once I get the proportions and the composition and all that stuff,
You're basically just doodling in what you need to get
after
fill
that,
it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to town. I'm in La La Land up here,
Yeah.
and I could be making sounds, or there's no telling. I'm on vacation when it gets to that part.
There you
So
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
I'll have something playing as long as I don't have to look at it.
Sure.
I'm good.
Okay. Some.
And you work on a Cintiq, right?
I work on a XP pen 2150. It's a cheaper version. It's really good, really good. I researched it for about a year before I actually got it, and man, I haven't looked back. I buy them every time now.
Oh, that's good.
So,
I never heard of them.
well, let me tell you, Cintiq 2500 to 3000 versus a XP pen for whole shebang with the arm and all the accessories. 400 and something, almost 500.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I did not know that.
And I've used the Cintiq.
Yeah.
It's just as good. Some people make a lot of fuss about the parallax, the glass,
Sure.
Yeah.
it's not a thing.
Yeah. Well, everyone's gonna try to like claim, mine's the best, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's. I mean, I'm always just like work whatever you want to work with, whatever works for
Well,
you.
I
Yeah.
will tell you about some of these YouTube folks, and y'all already know this. I'm really don't really have to say anything at all about it, but a lot of these people who are they're getting paid. They're
Mhm.
getting paid by a company. Sometimes they get free stuff. Sometimes they just get a check.
Yeah.
But I've seen YouTubers be like, "Oh, I love the XP pen or the UG, 2150, or I like the Huion, blah blah blah." And then like a couple weeks later, they're like, well, I'm reviewing this Cintiq here, and I've got to say that this is 10 times better, and I'll never use this again." I've used both. It's not that much of a difference. A lot of people try to say that it is. I'm telling you, it's they're they. What happened is one of Cintiq's people or Wacom's people called them up. Hey, we got this little deal. You give us a favorable review, then we'll send you something free. You know what I'm saying?
I could live with that.
Little kickback.
That being said, Wacom, LibreOffice, our DMs are open.
Yeah, that's right. We will say whatever you want.
In saying that, we're not saying no per se.
We're saying not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, no, that's. I always think that like any sort of elitism or gatekeeping is already kind of dumb, but when it gets to like tool elitism, it's very weird. 'Cause, I mean, that's I mean, that's the classic thing we're always like taught as kids: is a poor craftsman blames his tools. I'm like, well, also a poor craftsman relies on his tools.
Well, it's funny. I used to have teachers that would sit there, and what would they? One would say no one uses a paint bucket in Photoshop. He's like, you go up to the menu and use fill. If you use a paint bucket, you're a beginner. So I just use the paint bucket the whole. Because I mean, every time my teachers told me not to do something, I'm like, you know what? Screw you. I'm going to do it the whole time now. It's just because it's the same thing. It's literally the exact same thing. And I remember one teacher was like, he was painting, and I understand his reasoning behind this, but he's like, if you're painting in Photoshop, you don't use layers. You paint like a real painter. You paint over to whatever. And I'm like, look, if it's there, just take advantage of it. I mean, it's just it's ridiculous. I mean, they built these tools for that reason, to just not take advantage of it because of some sort of artistic ego. No one cares. There's no one looking over your shoulder going like, you're using layers and like fired. Like no.
Yeah, because like I mean, I get like if some person wants to limit themselves to like 8 layers or whatever because they don't want to like overthink it or go overboard. Like I just want to finish 8 layers and move on. But if someone's like, no, I work on only 1 layer because I'm an artiste.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous. I've heard people talk about that with tools and stuff.
Yeah.
They talk about workflow. I mean, again, if you're talking about workflow in that context, use whatever works for you.
Yeah.
I mean, people. I mean, I used to buy Bristol board, and then I thought it was so expensive to spend like $20-$30 on like 24 pages of Bristol board. So I started drawing on cardstock that I got from Kinko's, and now I spend $43 on 300 pages of cardstock, and it lasts me like years.
Yeah.
And like I've just like, and it's like, and since I'm scanning the pages into the computer, no one cares what I draw on. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm I call myself the ghetto artist because I will destroy my art supplies. Like I draw on this cardboard because the cardboard like gives this sort of give for my pencils, and that cardboard is just the back of drawing tablets. I just tear them off and draw on those, and I'll save my drawing tablets just to tear the cardboard after. Like I'll just use anything and everything. Rarely will I go out and buy things. I don't know. I don't. I just use what I have. I'm always figuring out ways to do stuff. And same thing in computer I mean, people still talk about like, well, Clip Studio is superior to Photoshop or whatever. I'm like, depends on what you're doing, but they both have their strengths and weaknesses.
It also depends on what you're familiar with and what you started with,
Exactly.
I mean, there's always that. I mean, but in anything, what happens is there's people who come in and they start camping up,
Right.
then you got this camp of traditional people that, then you got the kind of quasi traditional that I do digital, but I never use undo.
Right.
And I do it just like my traditional stuff, just so it'll have that same spirit. And it sounds really good. But I mean,
those people are just saying that they never figured out how to press Control Z.
Exactly.
Well, they're undoing. No one's looking. They're like, undo.
Yeah. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's art. It's your world. It's your time out of this world. You do with it what you want. If you want to, be saddled with the yoke of, what everybody else is doing, that's fine.
I will say there are some habits that artists use even in the modern workflow that kind of drive me nuts, and it's just me. Don't take it like I'm saying that all people, but like people on computer screens or Cintiqs, and they continuously draw a line and then erase it, draw it, erase it, draw and erase it to get the perfect line. I'm just like, stop. You're gonna be there forever. If you have to draw every line 12 times, you're gonna be at this thing forever. Just go for it. And but oh man, and that really is that technology. I mean, when I did it by paper, you drew that line. It's like, well, that's it, dude. You got to have whiteout or if it's a pencil and eraser. But yeah, the undo button could be kind of a crutch because, man, it's like, well, it's not the perfect line. It's like, look, out of all the lines you're going to put in this page, no one's going to focus on that line. Trust me, just finish it.
Yeah. I mean, I was Babs Tarr did a video series, and she had said, it's like, no, you don't want any like weird sketchy lines, but the line you go with is the line that's on the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's every time I see people do that, I just want to slap the pen out of the hand. Stop it.
Yep.
Well, the thing about me is I'll do something for a while one way, and then I may change. I may decide just to kind of shake things up a little bit, and hey, I'm gonna come at this a totally different route. And sometimes it passes, sometimes it fails, sometimes it makes me take longer to do stuff. But like I say, it's your time. It's your, judges can stay, they can do. I don't care how people do their stuff. I mean, if you want to go outside and blow off some steam and jump on a trampoline or something, I mean, who wants somebody standing there at the trampoline saying, "No, you need to put your legs more together. Don't spread them out. You don't need to." Hey, why aren't you jumping? Why are you laying on the trampoline? It's a trampoline. It's made for jumping. You know what I'm saying? I mean.
Yeah, I told you to quit telling me that last time I was on the
Yeah,
trampoline.
exactly.
You shut up.
That's what I'm talking about. But I mean, it's your time. It's your fun. You carved out time for it. You do it how you want to. It's that's what it should be.
So speaking of workflow, what do you take when people actually put the time it takes them to finish a picture? Like this is especially with speed painters. This is they're like, picture's done, hour 15 minutes. I'm like, no one cares how long it took you to make it.
I think with speed painters that kind of makes sense because that's kind of like their whole shtick. That's what they're training to do.
Their whole shtick. But so I'm like, okay, but I've seen the other artists who do line art, like did this sketch of Superman, whatever, 25 minutes. Like nobody cares how long it took.
I think for some of that, it may even just be for themselves, like as a form of like self accountability. Like if you are someone who, I know some people like keep their accountability going way too long into their professional career.
Yeah.
But if you are someone who spends a lot of time undoing lines over and over again, it might be kind of a good thing to just record your times drawing the same thing over again and try to get it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, doing it right or whatever. I don't know. There's certain, I mean, like I said, but I've been drawing a long time, like Quentin that. I'm sure Quentin has see other people do artistic habits where some of them, you're just like, you could stop that.
Man. And I worked in an art room with people. And I saw a lot of stuff that would drive me nuts, but
you just gotta let it. You just gotta grit your teeth and like walk away.
Yeah, the comfort factor is definitely something that's part of like the creative workflow. Like working in what you're comfortable with is going to help you get that flow better than perhaps using something that might be more efficient.
Okay.
But if there's a wild difference in something, like if you see someone who is doing like hard coloring work or line or inking in like Microsoft Paint when there's freeware that exists, I'm like,
exactly,
I get it, but my guy.
It's weird because I still find it, speaking of workflow, weird that people will still do pencils in the computer. Not as much, but still, I'm like, and then we do inks, and I'm like, you can just rough it out and go straight to inks because the pen is going to draw in black. So I mean, and let's face it, inking was an artifact of the old days when printers couldn't pick up pencil.
Yeah.
But now it's become an art form. But when they go like, well, here's my pencil page, and I'm going to ink it. I'm like, why didn't you just draw it in black? It would have been inked when you drew it.
Yeah.
Why are you taking this extra step?
It's a little bit like customers that I get sometimes. Instead of just emailing me what they want, like they'll give an example of something, they will take a picture of a computer screen with an example of what they want on there, and I'm like, okay,
thank you. Yeah, it's like you can't just
there's a subreddit that I'm part of for a game called Hearts of Iron, and a lot of the subreddit is people taking pictures of their game state and like asking for advice or whatever. It's like showing what they did, their achievements or whatever. But there was like a solid 3 months where people were just doing phone pictures of their monitor and then posting it they got to the point where the moderators had to step in, and like these were like really bad pictures too. Like it was like blurry, or like someone was like moving, or like you got like reflection in it or whatever. So it got to the point where the moderators had to like stop the thread for a second to put in a tutorial on how to press print screen, copy paste in Microsoft Paint.
Yeah.
I think when I'm going to ask Quentin to draw something, but when I send the reference, I am going to put my computer screen in front of a mirror and then take a picture of the screen in the mirror.
I get it every day, man.
And get it. And just...
Every day.
No, what you do is
you
you get your screenshot. You print off your screen state. You then put that in a mirror and then take a picture of that print.
I've got a huge aneurysm in my brain just ready to go off. I don't know what's going to set it off. I mean,
but
so
that
far,
might do
I'm
it.
still alive. So, I mean, you know.
Well, there was I had a friend who worked at the library that what did it say? Like, it said something like copy the Word document. So the guy actually ended up copying the whole Word program. It's like, wow. And that was one big document.
Yeah.
I mean, when you came back to the guy, he's just kind of like, okay, let me explain this all over again.
Yeah, it's like putting a Tupperware bowl in a dishwasher and leaving the lid on. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Doesn't
crazy
really clean the
stuff.
inside. Yeah, I as far as like workflow and stuff, do you find that the computer helps you with your workflow? Like, do you feel it speeds you up, or do you feel like it slows you down at all? I've always wondered that for people because I've always drawn traditionally and I've incorporated the computer, but I never could figure out if it really sped me up or slowed me down.
I'd have to say it's actually sped me up.
Has it? Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to say it sped me up. That's mainly the reason why I do digital. Another thing is the ease of use. The time that you save not only in the actual act of doing the art, but the sending and receiving and hey, could you change this? Sure.
Yeah.
I'll lasso tool and delete or
Yeah,
lasso tool and move or okay, you know, so I mean, I think it's actually in the end game, not necessarily in the actual drawing, but in the end game, when it's all said and done and everything's added up, you know, yes, a lot more comfortable.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
And say as a writer, it also kind of you get kind of a similar effect where it's a lot more in like the long term. Or if I'm pre-writing, I might be able to like enter into state of flow, like writing in a journal or writing on like 3x5s, because there's something like manual, like tactile happening. But if I'm actually writing something, having it in a Word document, so I can go back and make really quick edits, or I can jump lines, or if I need to like find something that I need to reference later on, I can just Control F and find it. If I'm like writing like full script, which I tried in a journal, like if it gets to the point where like I realize like, oh no, I should do this in something else. Instead of taking an eraser to the page and rewriting the page, I'm just going to close the journal and walk away.
Yeah,
I was going to put this in a computer. But being able to do that really quickly, and then also having that saved as an artifact, like in the computer, if I need to like see what my revision history was, I can see exactly what changed if I want to pull something back.
Okay, that makes sense.
Valuable. Yeah,
it's weird because I draw by paper and I still ink by hand, even though I can ink in the computer. I just like inking by hand, and then I scan it in and then color it in the computer. So the final image is digital. I just start out doing analog. I don't know if I feel like it sped me up or slowed me down adding that. The only thing, because people have talked about, if I'm drawing on paper, it's like really just drawing and then flipping it if you want to erase something, and flipping and drawing, and flipping and erasing and drawing. But when you're on a computer, you have to, not all the time, but you have to go over and click things, and you have to pull things, and that those extra going and like hitting buttons and things actually sometimes people feel like it adds to the work time instead of detracting.
Well, yeah. One thing about that with me though is, for one, I am familiar enough with this because I do it so much on a daily basis. And when I first started, it took a long time. And I really just decided, you know what, I'm not doing anything traditional until I get this down to where I have an idea, and I can just put it in here. And it took a while to get to that point, but after a couple months, that's I was good, and that's a couple months of doing nothing but no little notebook scrabbles. I still do any kind of concept art that I have. Like I try to keep a notebook with me, and I
just
have
stuff
just
that you're thinking of.
crazy, whatever comes to mind. I mean, and some stuff, what I'll end up doing with the notebook is I'll take pictures on my phone and then translate it over to the computer if it's something that's really, catching my attention.
Right.
But yeah, I still do this with a notebook and stuff. But as far
Okay,
as
so
finished pieces, it's
yeah.
And this, by the way, this is all. I don't use pencil. I just use an ink pen.
I was just thinking that it looks like a straight up ink pen going in.
Yeah, it's
You're
scribbledy
getting your
scratch with an ink
ideas down.
pen. I've got and I mean these are just basic pens. I got a Pilot G2 1.1, and then I've got this one I've been using. Not this particular pen, but this kind of pen I've been using since shop class in school.
Oh yeah,
And this
yeah.
pen has not changed in all those years. It looks the same. It's such a good fine line pen. The only problem is over time, because I can look at my old school stuff, because my mom kept it. I didn't even know she was, but she did. It turns green
Oh
after
yeah, yeah. I
years.
think the pig pens, the tan colored ones. What are they called? It's Pigma, right?
Pigma. Yeah.
They will actually start to bleed a sort of reddish brown too, or something like
Is
that.
that right? I
I
didn't know
think
that.
so. I
They're
think
supposed
so.
to
I
be
know.
archival quality.
Yeah, I know. Sharpies will, especially if they're on paper, because there's people who will use Sharpies to fill in blacks really quick, and then it over time that those will bleed like a brownish red. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But I know there's some that I've gone back and looked at. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of destroyed. But I mean, since most of my stuff is, you know, in the computer. And this stuff I still fix. And when I draw, like if I drew a head too big, but I like the head, I think it looks good. I'll just, keep drawing it, and then in the computer, it'll also want to shrink it down and redraw it in. But I still draw, and I don't know. Like I've drawn digital on a Cintiq or whatever, and I like it, but I don't know if I've drawn like you enough on a Cintiq to know if it sped me up or not. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So. But yeah, I was just kind of curious in the concept of workflow, because it seems like, especially if you get ideas, like you keep a notebook, it's always handy to just grab it, and like if you had to like go in and boot up your program, make a new file, that would be it's easier just to grab something and jot it down.
I think also like for idea generation and for if I'm like taking notes for edits, and not necessarily that in process, but like having 3x5s littered around the house, and I have.
Yep.
2 journals there. I have 2 journals upstairs. I have another one in the kitchen. But literally, like, if I have an idea, whatever, I'll over, grab it, point my thing down, and then I can leave.
Yeah.
But the actual like creative process, I like doing that more in digital.
Strange enough, when you write story, I think we all create stories. When you create story, do you actually start out with designing the main characters or designing the world?
Depends. With Wolf Hunter, that was more so designing the world is kind of weird because it's an alternate history, so it's our world. But that one is more so plot focused. That was more so I knew the narrative before I knew the characters would be undertaking it.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
But with the new book that's being worked on, that one I had all the characters plotted out, and then I figured out the characters designed, and then I figured out how they were connected through the plot.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of depends on what I think is the unique factor of the story. If it's like I definitely feel like there's spy stories in World War II. There is war stories in World War II, obviously. But I think the unique part of it was it being a very canned technology heist set in a bottle. I think that was the unique, like, cool factor about it. So for me, that's what popped in my head first. Whereas the book that's being worked on, it's Roman mythology in space, and in any sort of mythology, it's always the characters and the gods that are some of the most interesting people. So for me, I knew the characters that I wanted to have like really be the focal point because I thought they were very cool.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I started designing characters, and like I said, my book was so long. It's been a while. When I started, when I write stories, now, I usually it's some sort of weird idea. Most of my stuff is plot based. Like I'm usually thinking, what is the character trying to do, and then from there, to me, it'll like, well, then this idea would work better in a fantasy world or a sci-fi world, and then what would be? And I try to think of a unique twist. Like a lot of times, if I'm writing like a warrior or something, like, well, maybe I should give him some really weird weapon or some sort of handicap or whatever. I like the design characters that seem out of the box so weird, and then because it gives, when I'm writing them, I usually gives me more fun opportunities to do different things. Like I think I showed the one with like I have a guy that the new character I'm working on for a story, he's like a kid. He gets his arms severed off from like the forearms up, and in this fantasy world these people use these sort of gauntlets like with these hooks and chains on them, and so they can swing these hooks and chains and like pick nuts and fruits off trees, like they use it to harvest or whatever.
Yes.
But when he gets his arms cut off, he gets thrown into a burning building by the guy who did it, like this warlord. And to stop the bleeding, because he's bleeding to death, the place where it's burning down is where they keep these sort of gauntlets. And so he literally shoves his arms in these burning gauntlets and like cauterizes, seals them. And so it's almost kind of like an Army of Darkness, Bruce Campbell sort of thing, where he like, now he has these things fused to his body. And so I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. I mean, he can use these as weapons, swinging around these hooks and these huge hooks and hooking things, but he's also handicapped because he doesn't have any hands.
Yeah.
So I've always liked that idea of like handicapping my characters, but they're giving them something unique that also gives them an advantage.
I think also I come from like a lot of people in my family do have some sort of disability, and then like I mean, I myself, like whenever there's a character who deals like some sort of like intense photophobia, because like I have intense photophobia, like I do not do well with halogen or LED lights.
Okay.
I also have tinnitus. So like whenever I see a character who deals with like either of those disabilities, like it always like is a little more resonant with me. And so I think, I definitely get my camera cut out there, but I definitely get the value of having like, as a reader, having a disabled character that might reflect you. That's why I feel like a lot of people gravitate towards Barbara Gordon also. They see themselves. Yeah. So I think that was also something that I wanted to do with, and that was the thing that came after the fact, because Willard came secondary to the plot. And then as I screened Willard, I'm like, well, I want to be like honest to World War II. Like you're far more common to come out of that not wholly intact than you were to like make it all the way through. And so having him with a prosthetic leg felt very honest, not only to the character, but also I think for any readers who may have like, similar situations, that hopefully they can connect with the idea of like still being in a heroic role.
Right.
I
think you're right. I think a lot of people don't come through that. I mean, that was one of the big things in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Was that the quest destroyed him, inside, which I liked. I like certain. I mean, again, I've always written characters like you kind of have to take your characters through hell and back. In other words,
and that was definitely J.R.R. Tolkien, like talking about his like doing his own reflection for his experience in World War One was like not necessarily like the physical death, but the emotional death you experience through that.
Right, that's what it was. With he very much see that in the Lord of the Rings. I mean, with Godlings, I mean, the character was I was focusing on character change. He's just kind of cocky kid, and then as he goes through the story, it's like what happens to him humbles him, and so that character growth in that. But once I kind of figured out, because I remember designing him. I designed the characters, the three sort of gods I wanted, and I knew what they were going to do. And then from there, I started designing the world and whatnot. So I think I kind of designed like, this is what I want my characters to do. This is why I think they would look cool. Like character think would look cool. And then now I need to put them in a setting. So I go plot, character, world, I think. But I do start with the plot. Like what are they trying to do? Like what are they trying to get at the end? And then from there I just work backwards. And half of my stuff is plot worthy and the other half was like, well, I just think that'd be cool. Which I think most writers and artists do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might be something to get into. Like next week, we're going to do a artist craft episode where we talk about like Clip Studio, Manga Studio, and I go through but like writers don't really have tools to do courses on, but you might do a writer craft episode where we talk about plot driven versus character driven narratives and stuff like that.
Yeah. Which there is a difference, and I think I'm much more attracted to plot driven. At least I've noticed. Well, strangely, I think Godlings was plot driven, but actually it's weird. As I finished the story, I realized I think it was much more of a character study than I thought it was, and it just kind of grew naturally out of writing it. So it started out as a very plot driven story, became very much a character driven story, at least for the main character to me.
Definitely. All right. And if you do want to purchase some of these fantastic comics, which we have been talking about our very in-depth creative process for, we do have a Kickstarter running right now. We have 4 more days on it, or however many more days whenever you're watching this. And if you're watching this VOD months in the future, we might be running another Kickstarter for Wolf Hunter number 2 or something. So
you're making more.
We're making more. So we're going to run our ad for that. And if you're at all interested, please sign up over to our Kickstarter. And whatever one is running at that moment. We got 4 more days of Wolf Hunter 1 and Sirens number 1. We have hit our first stretch goal. We are closing in on our second stretch goal, which is a history commentary where I get to talk about the Tizard mission, the vehicles and technology you're seeing, and some of the politics surrounding Churchill and the Ministry.
Hi, and welcome to the Kickstarter for Silverline's latest double feature, Wolf Hunter number 1 and Sirens number 1 remix. This is our 17th Kickstarter. What? Yes, my mind is blown. We have successfully fulfilled 15 of those, and number 16 is still in progress, so we'll get to 16 successfully. But you're here to know about Wolf Hunter, so I'm going to make room for Tim. Take it away, Tim.
Hi, this is Tim TK. Wolf Hunter is the story of RAF Group Captain James Willard after he's injured in the Blitz during World War II. He is then hired by Churchill to perform counterintelligence operations on English soil, where he will have to locate and neutralize a German spy. During the course of his mission, he'll have to prove to Churchill and to himself that he still has fight in him and he's still the man for the job, even after all he's been through.
Doesn't that sound cool? So the other one we're kickstarting with that is Sirens. Now, Sirens was published in the early 1990s. Silverline was a packager then. Silverline wasn't the publisher, we were the packager. And they went together in double size, but we're going to do them as they were originally intended to be. 4 issues. This is the first issue. So, horror story of Jeff Delmer in New Orleans, who gets trapped in the siren's call, and she's slowly turning him into a zombie. So, you gotta read it, back it if you can, share it if you will, and remember to make mine Silverline.
It's always so loud, but yes.
It's always so loud. Well,
Yeah.
when they do the Silverline intro, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just commenting on a Facebook post I made earlier, which it's kind of a meme, which is, don't tell me your astrological sign, tell me your favorite X-Men. That's far more telling.
Oh, yeah.
And then
you the one that posted that? I saw that.
And then it turned into people asking me to tell them what I thought their favorite X-Men was. I'm like, this isn't not supposed to work, but okay. And so far, I am 3 for 3, so I am the Mutant Whisperer.
About 3 for 3, about like guessing everyone's favorite X-Men?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, guess mine, because I'm an X-Men fan.
I'm gonna take an audible here, but I want There's maybe an audible. I'm gonna say Boom Boom.
No.
Okay.
I'll give you a hint. Think straight up Claremont's Run. I know, that's jogging ahead to take a nap and think back, right?
All right, we got 40 years of X-Men here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. What decade?
Yeah. Like straight, I mean, he gave Storm a lot of love. I feel like I have to be like one of the big 3, either Storm, Cyclops, or Wolverine. Because those are.
I could tell you who my favorites are. Do you want me to tell you?
Sure, yeah.
Let me just say, first of all, Aaron's is going to be different.
It's gonna be something straight out of the
I don't
field.
think it's too different. My favorites were Nightcrawler,
Okay.
Colossus. Always liked Colossus. And I think if I had to pick a third one, I think you're right. I think it would be Storm would be up there as one of them.
Yeah.
I never got into Cyclops. Wolverine was okay, but it was like I really liked Rogue, but I liked Rogue back in her punk days. I didn't like what they kind of made her. She was always Southern, but she was more punkish. I'm trying to think of all the other ones. I think those are kind of. I like Colossus and I like Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
My favorite team was the one when they were in the Outback in the Destroyer.
Oh yeah,
that was my favorite team.
Yeah,
when they were all together.
Wildlands,
which Nightcrawler was not, but Colossus was on that.
Yes, yeah.
And Storm was on that.
No.
So, yeah.
Yeah, my favorite ones are like very out of left field for a lot of people. What's actually I feel like they make sense, but Cable and Pete Wisdom, favorite team being Excalibur and MI13.
Yeah. Now, do you for Cable? Did you like Cable when Liefeld wrote him, or would you like Cable more when he was out of Liefeld's hand and other people wrote him?
I got into him with Liefeld wrote him, but I liked him more as he got developed. Like Soldier X was such a very personable with a Cable, which I thought was really great. But when he got into Messiah, like the Messiah storylines, that's when the Cable really came to life for me. That's when I really got to see he's not just like a mercenary. He's actually there's a lot to him, and seeing him becoming a father, I thought was really cool.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I think that's. I mean, there's other ones I liked. I actually did like Psylocke before she was a ninja lady. I actually kind of liked her more when she was wore a suit of armor and.
Yeah. Well, then she kind of brought her back when she became the new Captain Britain.
Yeah, they kind of brought her original sort of idea of what she was back, which I thought was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say Cyclops is okay. Wolverine is okay, but Wolverine sometimes is kind of one note. I mean, he's tough, but there was not much more with him. I liked Nightcrawler from the comic. I was not the one in the movie was
he was okay.
Okay, yeah. I think they actually made him a little better when they made him younger in the later movies.
Yeah.
But he was always a jokester and kind of a jovial guy, and they kind of took that out of the movies.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought that kind of ruined his character, because that was half the fun, was that he was like this, every time somebody showed up new to the X Mansion, he's flirting with the girls or whatever. I mean, he's this sort of cad character, which I always liked. I mean,
I was so after he became a Catholic priest, where he's still just very insincere with a lot of things. I thought it was great. Yeah.
Did you ever see the issue with Claremont when he used to go out drinking with Wolverine, and he was drunk and was drunk teleporting into people's rooms and stuff? That was hilarious.
Yes. I thought some of my favorite preps were Nightcrawler and Wolverine, or when you got Colossus and Cyclops put together, and they're just both trying to be I'm more serious than you. No.
Yeah, I know. It's funny too, because Colossus looked the best in the Deadpool movies, but they always kind of made fun that he was such a straight man. I mean, he was kind of a straight man in the comics. He was kind of more of almost kind of a tortured soul a little bit. Much more of a kind heart than how intimidating he looked. I mean, I still remember he had one where he couldn't. I can't remember. I think it was an injury he suffered in the battle with the Morlocks and the Mutant Massacre, and he couldn't. He had to stay in his iron form, and he had to concentrate to stay human. Yeah. And there was one where he was drawing in an alley, and I think somewhere maybe in Russia or a city, and some kids were playing with a firecracker, and the firecracker went off and broke his concentration, and reverted to his iron form. And it was he was drawing the superhero, and this little kid was when he was human form, he was drawing a superhero in his notebook, and this kid was like, "Oh wow, that's great! And I love superheroes." And then he turned in the Colossus. He's like, "Well, how do you like the real thing?" And of course, the kid was just, I think, in shock, "Oh my,
Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting, and I remember his strength was so out there that he would just touch things and it would just break them. And so there was writing liabilities in that character.
Yeah.
I did like his sister Magic too. Of course, Claremont did some with her, but not as much as they've done over the years. They did much more with her in the New Mutants, which I think
New Mutants. Yeah. And then I also liked her with and now with I'm blanking. Hickman. Hickman's doing a lot with her.
Yeah. Oh, is he?
Yes.
Is he still giving her the goat legs?
Sometimes. So she is still the. Oh, and also, was it Ellis? Wolverine and the X-Men, something like that. I also used a lot of her, but now that she's fully committed to being the princess of Limbo, essentially.
Oh, so she eventually did take over.
But that gives her the ability to control when she is in demon form and when she is fully human. And that's also why the soul sword is so potent now, is because then she got her soul back, and the entirety of her soul is stored in the sword.
Oh wow, okay.
And so she needs to hold that, otherwise it'll go back to Limbo. So.
Oh, interesting. Because she was interesting. I mean, because it was like her mutant power, she could teleport.
Mhm.
But I mean, she knew all this magic stuff too. Because if I remember right, wasn't she kidnapped very young into Limbo and raised in Limbo?
Yeah, she's kidnapped very young, and then she forgot about it, and then she got it back in the Utopia storyline, whereas her, Fairy, and someone else accidentally teleported into Limbo, and her adoptive father at that point ended up giving her like the full rundown. I'm like, by the way, this is where you belong, and if you don't do what I'm going to say, I'm going to kill your friends.
Okay, yeah.
I remember this storyline.
Yeah.
I do.
I remember because at the time I was saying kind of into Fairy because she was just fun and cute, and I'm like, oh god, don't kill her.
Speaking of weird storylines, I was not like a super fan of the Inferno storyline, the original one, but didn't they do a second Inferno just recently? I thought like they did. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought there was something about.
I think the closest I'm getting to like a second Inferno would be the Vegas storyline with Strange, Avengers, and X-Men, where Mephisto corrupted Las Vegas and was using it to pull himself into the Prime Realm, and that's exactly the tone they're going for. Was like, of course, it's Las Vegas. And
corrupt Las Vegas.
Yep. And so Doctor Strange is kind of losing it, and he's not sure what he's seeing is real or not. So the Midnight Suns are there, but not really. But it's Doctor Strange essentially making these weird bargains in order to actually bring the real Avengers and real X-Men and real Midnight Suns there, while trying to like play his cards behind Mephisto's back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? Did you see that? It's not speaking of weird thing. That Facebook where it was like, I'm gonna try to remember this. Like he was talking that the superheroes have different names, and he's like, Ghost Rider should be called Daredevil because he's actually like. Yeah, there was one other one, but I was reading. I was like, this kind of makes sense. There was one other one I can't remember. Like Batman shouldn't be called Batman. Batman should be called Ghost Rider because he's riding on the ghost of his parents. and I was like, oh my god, this kind of makes sense. And there was a third one. I was like, okay, that's good. Batman, Ghost Rider, Daredevil, and Daredevil should have been called like Batman. Yeah, it was Daredevil should be called Batman because he's blind and uses sonar. Like a bat. And I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of see that. So that's kind of ingenious. After thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, they should have that, but
right.
I just thought that was funny. I'm like, okay.
My favorite thing now has been the Moon Knight posting meme pages where they're it's essentially just taking like Moon Knight takes on the MCU or whatever. Where it's like, well, this scene here in Avengers is actually setting up the ketamine lab that'll be set up in Midnight Man's basement.
Speaking of Moon Knight, did you hear that they're actually separating that away from the Marvel Cinematic Universe? They're making its own universe.
Yeah, which I think is gonna be a little interesting, but I mean, it depends on how weird they want to get with it, because I know they're committing to at least 3 of his alters for his DID. I would say the full name, but it's late and my speech is not present.
Yeah.
Dissociative identity disorder. I think I said it. Yeah. But we are getting I know we're getting Mr. Knight, Mark Spector, and Stephen Grant at least.
Oh.
And yeah. Which also, and they showed that each one of them is going to have a different suit when they turn into Moon Knight. Because we have Mr. Knight we have Mr. Knight in the actual like tie suit that he got in the.
Oh yeah, because it's the one that has a scar. Okay.
And I believe Mark Spector is going to be the more mummy looking one, because that one looks a little bit more mercenary-ish, and also looks like the wrappings of a tomb, and so since he was found at the throne of Khonshu
Yeah.
at his tomb.
I know Roland didn't like the mummy look of the suit. I the one they've been showing. I actually didn't mind it because it's Egyptian based.
Yeah, no, I mean that's like fully commit to it. Yeah. I like I said, the weirder comics get, the more I'm into it. So like the weirder costume is, the more I'm into it.
Yeah, it was unique because people are like, Moon Knight's like the Batman of like Marvel, and I'm like, yes and no.
Yes,
I mean, he is the kind of the guy in the game jumping rooftop to rooftop, but
he's a detective.
Not.
Yeah, he's a detective, but he's more so a paranormal detective, and he actually has powers. Is he more so the Constantine?
Yeah, of Marvel.
Like, yes, yeah. That's a closer relation, I think. Yeah,
I'd be curious if they're going to. The one thing I'm curious to see if they would do in Moon Knight would be add in the Midnight Suns. But the only reason I don't think they are is they already are adding in Blade into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he's one of the main components of the Midnight Suns. So to making Moon Knight separate from the universe, how are they gonna, unless they do another Blade?
My thought is that they might eventually be doing some sort of multiversal type stuff, since we already are getting multiverse. We're going to do like a battle world where like now people are just getting thrown across realms, which if they ever want to do team shakeups while keeping movies kind of like, somewhat consistent without having people track 50,000 projects, like, all right, new continuity time.
Yeah. I kind of like the fact, I just don't really see Blade in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's a cool character.
I don't know if it'll be interesting to see how his standalone works, if it is going to be a truly standalone, or if they're going to use it to introduce Midnight Suns, because we already have him talking with Black Knight.
Yeah.
And we already know that at some point Robbie...
Mobius. Is Mobius ever coming in? Because Mobius is Sony owned.
Mobius is Sony owned, but we do have Michael Keaton...
Batman.
Hackman. Hackman? Falcon? What's his name?
Vulture.
Okay.
So many birds tonight. Michael Keaton's Vulture is going to be in Morbius, and that is in the MCU.
Okay, interesting.
But he mentions Venom, so it's very weird, and that we might just be like acknowledging that the timelines are completely jank at this point.
What do you feel about? Do you feel them mixing all these movies together? Do you think it's more of a cheap sales gimmick, or do you think it's actually going to write some good stories?
I think they have the chance to write some really good stories, but I think it is more so that we've reached a point where it is no longer marketers like Hackman. Also, we got Hackerman from Kung Fury, so maybe we'll get that in there at some point. But I think more so it's getting to the point where as we've seen with James Gunn and with other people who are like involved in the actual like studio process, actual comic fans and the crossovers, that it's supposed to get you like, oh yes, my favorite characters, yes, go, cool. I don't care, it's cool. I think it's more so now more of them are involved in the creative process than it is like what resulted in Blades 2 and 3 and Shaq's Steel is marketers saying like, hey, this is selling well, let's buy it.
I thought it was funny when they put Blade in the What We Do in the Shadows TV show.
Yes, yeah.
That was, so I don't know, but it was weird because the Marvel Cinematic Universe seemed to have like this huge storyline leading up to Thanos. And now it seems like they have all these multiverse crossover, and that you can't figure out who the big bad guy is.
I think the big bad guy is gonna be Kang. I feel like with how much multiverse is happening.
I really like Kang. I hope they kind of do him right. The one thing I hope they don't do is I was never a big fan of how they did Thanos. I really liked Thanos more in the comic, how he was just in love with death. He was this crazy god. That was cool. I did not like that he was like, but I'm trying to save everyone in the universe. But I'm just like, no, that's quit. That's my biggest problem with a lot of the Marvel movies. They keep trying to make their bad guys relatable, and I'm like, stop that. Don't. They're bad for a reason. And so I hope they don't do that with Kang, because Kang is so cool because he just conquers because it's a sport. He just wants to do it. And so like, just keep that. Don't have him be like, yeah, but I want to conquer to feed the children. It's like, no, stop that. Just have him be what he is.
I get why they did it, because that was something like Stanley said is like a difference between a villain and a hero is this: a villain takes their path too far gone.
Yeah. But Thanos was like the mad god, and that's what I loved about him. And they kind of in the show when he's crying, I'm like, Thanos doesn't cry.
that was. I mean, yeah, that's a little weird. But I mean, and also that's like outside of like a few people, most people are not inherently. So like that's
not inherently bad, right?
And like in storytelling, that's always I tell you want to make a relatable villain is have them make the villain is always the person who chooses the wrong way of doing things, the violently wrong way of doing things. And so like I like the way where they can set up Thanos is never soft. Yeah.
Yeah, he was never soft. He was like
Yes.
this. Yeah, that's
Although,
what I liked about him because I'm just one like. I see what you're saying that making the villain relatable in some way, but I've seen that enough. But I tend to notice I still kind of gravitate towards villains that are just like the Joker sometimes that are just nuts.
Sure.
I mean, there's no relatability to that guy. He's just nuts.
Yeah. I think also it is kind of like it can also be a subjective thing where like some people like the like more so not necessarily the human villain, but it's more like the conceptual villain where like the Joker is the concept of chaos.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Where, like I like where like they kind of set up Kane maybe as being the concept of control, and that like we saw at the end of Loki. Spoilers, it's been months, but you see that Kane as being like, no, I have to maintain control. It has to be me, otherwise it all falls apart. It's like unless
I need to watch Loki, and I had no interest in watching. I'm still getting through the end of the WandaVision. I'm horrible with more. I've watched The Mandalorian season 1 and 2. I had not watched Book of Boba Fett. I've watched most of WandaVision and none of the other Marvel shows. But I've heard Kang was in Loki, so I'm like, well, I'll watch that just for Kang.
And like that was the good Kang, and the good Kang was to be like, no, I need to maintain absolute control, or if I don't, it has to be you. It's like there has to be absolute control, otherwise it all falls apart, and my plan doesn't work.
Did you ever read
the good guy being the absolute control? I think is kind of the for like what is bad Kang like?
Bad Kang is just one of my favorite Kang stories was an Avengers series called Avengers Forever. And it was just like this 12-part sort of separate story where they traveled through timelines and Kang was in there. But the way they did Kang, I loved him. There was I think
I'm just hoping that at some point someone calls him Kang of Kangs, because then I'm sold.
Yeah, because he's got all these multiple versions of Kang. And I'm sure with the multiverse they can do that, because it was supposed to be I just love the idea that when he brought his army with from all different eras of time, and there was just something really cool. And I did like the fact that he was like this gentleman conqueror. Like if the Avengers beat him, it was like a tip of the hat. Like, okay, then I will come back with a better plan. I just thought that was cool. Like it's all a sport to him.
Yeah, and the fact that also like he is, as long as the multiverse exists, he is unstoppable because there's a ton of Kangs and they're all in some way connected.
Yeah. So I think Kang would be the one villain. I think I did not like the way they did Ultron. I just felt they just completely. I just liked the Ultron when Ultron was just straight up psychotic. I mean, I read the one that was George Perez when he did the Avengers, and I can't remember who the writer was. I think it was Kurt Busiek, but don't quote me on that. And he wrote that, like, my favorite Ultron story, where it was like Ultron literally kills an entire third world nation just to get the Avengers' attention.
Yeah.
And I was just like that. And he was just straight up like the Terminator on crack. And I was like, that is cool. And then they put him into the show and he's like this making wisecracks and and I'm just like, no, that's not Ultron. That's, and I didn't like the fact that Ultron was kind of beatable. I always liked it when Ultron was like this unbeatable, like it took all the mighty Avengers and every time he comes back, he's improved. Yeah. Which I thought was like a cool concept.
He definitely felt more like Stark's Ultron, whereas in the comics it is Pym who makes Ultron. Yeah. I would have liked it.
It is Pym, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I liked the so there's a Secret Empire when the Avengers Resistance get a summons to meet with Pym, and then they find that it's half Pym, half Ultron. That Ultron has absorbed Pym into himself.
Yeah.
And he's like, and it's the ghost of Tony. He's like, no, Tony, I can't do that because you killed my wife.
Yeah.
Starts freaking out. They're having a dinner and he's just freaking out on everyone.
I love the fact that the robot is mentally unstable because Hank Pym scanned his brain, they bring him alive, and he's mentally. Yes. I just thought like all of that was great. And Disney, I don't know, I don't know why they keep taking those things out of the movie. Like I understand Tony's alcoholism. Okay, I get that, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't get I mean, they're like now they're doing an entire show
Mhm.
of Moon Knight about mental illness. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a factor in it, but you
Yeah.
couldn't do it for that villain. I mean, it was such a cool concept that the robot was mentally
Yeah.
unstable. I mean, that was such a weird. It was such a cool concept. That,
Yeah. That'd be interesting. Yeah, I do hope they do Moon Knight right. I know there's
Yeah.
already Um, my but I know also like with the way Disney's handling. I'm glad that for like the comics, Disney is letting Marvel run itself there. But for like the film and stuff, they already had issues. I feel like with Obi-Wan, in that they said the original story arc was going to be darker, but they lightened it up. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I get it, but I want grizzled Obi-Wan.
Right, and
Yeah.
and I want there is that, so and especially Obi-Wan takes place during like the dark times of that region when they're being
Yeah.
hunted and stuff.
Like,
And
and you see that he's dealing with Inquisitors, which are not great people, and you can do some very
Yeah.
interesting dark storylines with them. So
that's my biggest
Yeah.
problem with Disney sometimes is they always want to lighten it up to make it family friendly, and and a lot of the comics they're adapting and storylines aren't family friendly. They
Mhm.
were written to just be good storylines that fans
Yes.
liked of the property.
Mhm.
And when you dumb them down to make them family friendly, you kind of take away that edge or spark that made
Yeah.
them unique and different. And
You
that's
can get
kind
to
of my
point,
biggest problem with that
you can get to
stuff.
a point where like there are a lot of comics where it's still with mature content, but were approachable for younger readers.
Yeah.
But if you make something condescending, then it's approachable for no one because even the younger readers can tell that they're being condescended to.
So in some of the Marvel movies, not all of them, but some of them are like that. Some of them
Yeah.
were like that to me. I was not a big fan of the Ant-Man movies.
Hmm.
I don't know. I liked the Ant-Man. I know Hank Pym was in it, but I liked Ant-Man when I just liked him when he was unstable and he would like turn into the yellow jacket of the Ant-Man. I mean, it made that character unique. Then this
Mhm.
goofy guy could transform into an ant. I mean, I liked it more when he was like the scientist who's mentally unstable and he could turn the giant man, Ant-Man, all
Mhm.
and that was just there was like the dimensions to the characters, and Disney keeps taking those dimensions out of those characters.
Mhm.
And it kind of takes, I mean, they did that with Miss Marvel. She also suffered from alcoholism in the comics and stuff.
Yeah.
And when they make their heroes perfect, like they take away the internal demons these people have to deal with sometimes. And it makes them they're kind of one dimensional in the show sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of took away. They take away the flaws of the character. Like Tony Stark didn't have any flaws in the
Mhm.
show, really.
Yeah.
But in the comic, he has a ton of flaws.
Yeah. I think I
And
mean
so,
it sounds kind of like maybe dark and morbid, but with the revelation that Carol Danvers would have had in the Captain Marvel movie, if in like follow-ons that like she deals with some sort of like post-traumatic stress or like some sort of
Yeah.
outlet, and she understanding like my entire life is a lie. I've been at war for 30 some odd years
Right.
under false pretenses.
Because she was a war veteran. I remember
Yeah.
in the comic and stuff that she was that way. Captain America was another one they kind of a little bit they made fun of the fact, joked around the fact that he was a man at a time. Like, he's
Yeah.
like, I remember it was a joke, but in the comic, it was really traumatic for him because,
Mhm.
I mean, he lost his whole life. I mean, he came
Yeah.
back and his whole life was just gone.
Yeah.
And I remember like in one scene, it was in the Ultimates comic, he went back to Brooklyn, lived in Brooklyn, and one of the people like you can't live in this neighborhood, man, it's gone bad. And like he went back to his house, broken in, but it was like this is where he grew up, this is his neighborhood.
Yeah.
So it was like this sort of man at a time who was really like he's trying to rebuild his life. He's at a time he's trying to rebuild what even is left, and it's very traumatic. But in the movies, they just made it like, well, he's now like picking up, oh, I know that reference, or I know that, and it was like no, but that was like a major part of that character, and you minimized it, made it a joke instead of leaning into it and say like, no, this does suck for this guy.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest problem with the Marvel movies is like you keep taking away, which makes these characters multi-dimensional, and
Mhm.
it's like stop doing that.
Yeah. I think that was like I mentioned this on the Sunday show, Sunday Funnies, but
Yeah.
Stanley and also it was Matthew Scott from Wednesday Club later like reiterated and expanded upon the idea of comics being modern mythology.
Yeah.
And the one thing that makes mythology is a lot of times the heroes and like the gods involved have to overcome their own demons or overcome their own
Exactly.
parables. And I think that's why a lot of people like comics is you see these heroes overcome their demons. And I think that's also why like a lot of people would gravitate towards especially when people gravitate towards Magneto as he got taken over by Brubaker, and you saw the transformation from Max Eisenhart, Magneto, to Joseph, to blending the two into the current iteration of Magneto, where the idea of like, you've made very bad decisions. How do you reconcile that? How do you be there for people when you can't even trust yourself because you think you're going to step over the line?
Right.
And I think so. With like some of these Disney-fied characters, they seem like, you know, Disney characters where it's yeah.
And that's kind of the thing. I mean, they're doing that a little bit when I did WandaVision. Okay, it's like now they're kind of leaning into, because Wanda Maximoff was unstable, and I still remember. I think it was went to that House of Mutants when she was, you know, she said like no more mutants, and like killed half the mutants in the world, or like most of them, and that, you know, and she's just like, you know, she's mentally unstable and she can alter reality. Is like, that's not a good combination. And the fact they have kind of leaned that into the WandaVision, she, you know, she lost her you know, her kids, and that they still kind of bring humor into it. And sometimes again that still kind of bothers me. I'm like, if you're dealing with a heavy subject like that, the humor is okay in some parts, but really lean into it. Don't like, well, we got to, you know, soften it up and brighten it up because people, you know, expect that. It's like, well, then you're undercutting that severity of the story you're telling of this character.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. It's like, I love it when they do that. Like, I hope they don't do that with the X-Men, because I did think, regardless of what you think of the X-Men movies, and they were hit or miss with me too, I did think they did a good job of trying to give those characters more dimension than the single dimension. Wolverine, especially. Rogue, because she couldn't control her power. I mean, they really did lean into these people. Sometimes have powers that are curses. And I thought that was interesting, and they don't do that. And I'm afraid of Marvel, when they bring them in, they're just going to make them superheroes and forget all that. And it's like, no, a lot of the mutants are tortured souls trying to do what's right, but they're still like Rogue's trapped in a prison of herself and stuff. And so,
I definitely, I definitely get that. And I was like, oh, my lost it. So if people were watching earlier, they caught a glimpse of Quentin working on He-Man and some of his work there. But if we
something got jacked up when I was trying to share my screen.
But if you're follow our YouTube channel, friend of
it's back now,
sweet. But a friend of Silverline, Brad Graber, who is one of the founders of Powerhouse Animation, who worked on Masters of the Universe Revelation and Castlevania and Seis Manos and all that good stuff. They did an interview with Curtis, and one of the things he said in there, which I think is also applicable to comics and hero media in general, is he said, you know, animation isn't a genre, it's a medium. But I think comics themselves are a medium. I think also bringing into the idea where hero movies are becoming more of a medium, especially we saw it with Wolverine. Well, Wolverine was a straight up Western.
And I love Logan. Logan was probably that was the one X-Men movie where I felt if they nailed any of the characters, they really nailed that character in that movie.
And also I felt like that, even though he wasn't in there as long as as Logan, but the characterizations of an old and tortured
Xavier,
I felt was also really powerful in that. But I think, you know, a lot of times now it's with, you know, hero movies, the creative people who are on it who are not necessarily fans of the comics themselves try to punch it up at moments, and when it doesn't need to be punched up. Like the good comments that I get about Peacemaker is that even though it is funny, like, do get some very serious moments on that where it deals with very serious topics, and they don't punch it.
That. Is that worth watching? I've heard
from what I heard that it really handles, like, it knows how to handle its tones very well.
The one I really liked as far as adaptions was Invincible. I really felt, because I thought they were like, because when they first announced that, I was like, they're making it a cartoon. I'm like, man, that comic is intense. So I was like, are they gonna dumb that? And they actually went worse. I mean, they did the whole train scene. I'm like, well, that was never in the book. That's nuts. So
and that one also did a really good job. Like, it had its moments of chuckles. But when, like, especially like in the last 2-3 episodes, like, it was very much like it was very serious, and it was very like understanding the gravity of the situation.
What was happening.
And so I think the reason also why like Eternals was so like hit or miss and mix is because it was kind of that point where people were like, maybe we shouldn't punch it up, but then someone very clearly came in and was like, no, punch it up.
Yeah. You mean the Eternals movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it came off very like mixed because it didn't know exactly what it wanted to be.
It didn't, and I actually didn't mind the Eternals. I mean, it was an okay movie, but it did feel more like the superhero movies I like, where they're much more serious.
Mm-hmm.
And I did like the sort of the idea of trying to put a mythology in it. I thought was
Yeah.
kind of cool. There was a lot of things that it didn't like. Oh, I got to see this again. But I thought this is kind of cool. I mean, again,
Yeah.
it reminded me a little bit of them doing like the pantheon of like the Greek gods. I mean, the Justice League of the Greek gods. I mean, we all know that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Watchtower and all that. So it was almost in a way of them trying to do the Marvel version of the Justice League.
Yeah, and like as someone who like reads the Eternals, like I liked what they did with the characters, like the idea of like subverting the betrayer, because it's always well, he's Irish in this one, which is interesting, but I guess the actor's Irish, so it worked. But it's always the mind controller is always the traitor, because it makes sense.
Yeah.
But having Icarus be the traitor without and subverting that without was really like that was very cool. It's a very cool take on it because it's not something you see that happened with Eternals comics. But it didn't feel like it committed to selling that betrayal as much as it could have. Or
there was definitely that movie. It almost felt like the movie didn't even really fit into the Marvel universe, which I actually kind of liked. It felt kind of refreshing to see, and I liked how some of the Marvel movies, or maybe Shang-Chi, kind of was its own thing.
Shang-Chi was great. It was just a kung fu movie with Marvel mythology at some points.
Yeah, that's what I liked about it.
Yeah.
That I kind of like the straying away from it. I mean, I do agree that the movies are becoming their own genre. I mean, manga is its own storytelling genre, and American comics and stuff of that nature. And I've always, when people go like, well, comics are just like just stories with pictures. I'm like, no, there's an actual language in it. I mean, it is definitely its own thing.
Yeah.
Especially when you meet people who don't read comics and try to read them, and then they can't read them, or they can't figure things out. So yeah.
I always thought like when people want to just like figure out like movies that like they like or whatever, they find out they're based on comics. Like when people found out that Sin City was based on a comic.
Yeah,
like,
they had no idea.
Yeah,
they're like, really? Yeah, I mean, and then when you tell them like Road to Perdition is, and Ghost World, and there's other, like there's lots of movies, Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah.
They're like, that's a comic. I'm like, I just tell people, like, look, majority of the stuff you see is based on a comic. Wanted was based on a comic. Kick Ass. I mean, all the Mark Miller stuff. The Kingsman movies is based on a comic before it became a movie. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
People don't realize like how much they mine from comics. I'm like, yeah, they mine a ton. It's like the IP creator to make movies out of.
Yeah.
I talked to somebody the other day who was talking about Men in Black. And I was like, I remember that was an independent comic. I'm like, that was a comic? I'm like, for a while it was an independent comic. And they're like, I had no idea. And I'm like, yeah, most of the stuff you see in movies, Hollywood's not making this stuff up. People outside like us are, and they're taking advantage of it.
Yeah. I was like, now with like the more recent like Alien games, or like the Predator game, like mentioning like, oh, this took reference from this Dark Horse part, like this part of the Dark Horse run or whatever, and like, what? I'm like, yeah, the IP has been continuing on for like the last 20 years, but just as a comic,
when I remember when they made the Alien versus Predator movie, people were like, well, that's the dumbest idea ever, and I'm like, dude, they've been doing that for years in Dark Horse. I mean, in the original AVP comic was awesome.
Yeah,
some of the sequels okay, but the original one was great.
They should have just committed and gone full Predator versus Archie.
I know that was
now that Riverdale is a show, we might get it. Who knows?
Well, I mean, when you tell people like, yeah, Superman fought aliens and Tarzan fought the Predator, which I'd actually, out of all the Predator crossovers, that actually made the most sense because I mean, the Jungle Hunter and whatever. But Batman fought the Predator. I mean, but it was weird because people like, well, why would they mix Predator and Alien? And people ask me like, are they in the same universe? I'm like, yeah, in the comics, the Terminator and Predator and Aliens have kind of been in the same universe, and they even threw RoboCop in there. They kind of throw in all those sort of like edgy sci-fi movies I grew up in the one universe.
Yeah.
But Aliens and Predator, I mean, Dark Horse have been doing those forever. So it was funny when the movie and what's this stupid idea? I'm like, well, It's
Right.
not a new idea by any. Because I
Mm.
bought the original Alien versus Predator comic when I was in
Yeah.
high school. 92, 93 was back when they did it. And I mean, when they make the movie, the early 2000s or like something like that. So it was like years later they made it. But yeah.
Yeah. Because the movie came out when I was in school, and
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of something, is we bring this up like at least once a month on one of our shows, but the Punisher versus Archie of like in terms of all the weird crossovers. So he just thinks Archie's a drug dealer.
They never did, and maybe they have. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm surprised they never did a Punisher versus a Predator because that felt like that would be a great.
I don't know if they ever did. I think,
but it seems like that's something they may have done somewhere.
I think by that point, Marvel is becoming a little more self-aware of their IP and is wanting to stay a little more clear. By the time that the Predator comics had started picking up a lot of steam, because I think because there's getting close to like when you're getting like these main runs of Predator and Alien, Marvel and DC were looking at doing Marvel versus DC, and then like, well, maybe we'll revisit this once in the future, but that's approach it for like out of brand crossovers.
What do you, strangely enough, I'm not a big, when they started like, we're going to bring the aliens into the Marvel universe proper, I was like, no, don't do that.
No.
I mean, we had that back when, Superman fought aliens, Batman fought aliens, it was these crossovers. Like, we've been there, done that. So to bring them in the Marvel universe, like, no, that's stupid.
We already have the Horde, which is kind of aliens with a little more personality.
Yeah,
Brood,
aliens.
Yeah,
the Brood is alien, so you don't need to bring them in.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's what was it? I was going to ask something profound and now I forgot. It figures.
What are your thoughts on Kantian deontology?
Kantian which one?
Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, had the concept of deontology, which is ethics by duty, and that you understand your duty to others and act out of accordance to that.
No, I don't have any sort of connection to that. That's what I was going to ask. What do you?
I'm glad I could remind you with that.
Yeah, no. What did you think of the new Predator movie called Prey?
I did not watch it.
It's not out yet.
Okay. So then, did I watch? Was supposed to be showing Predators?
It was Predators, and they're making a new one, and I think it's directed like HBO Max or something. It's called Prey. And it's actually about the Predator who's hunting a Native American girl. I think she might be Comanche, and I'm not sure.
Right.
In the 17th century.
Yeah.
When I heard that, I'm like, that sounds like a cool idea. But then I heard they're going to do magic. I'm like, that's a bad idea.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that because I remember I didn't see Predators, and then I heard Prey, and then I haven't really heard about Prey as much. But I was thinking, okay, maybe this might be worth checking out. But then I heard the same thing. I'm like, anytime you try to like deal with like Native American magic or spirituality, you're going to do it horribly wrong.
You're going to do it horribly wrong, and you just don't make her a Disney princess. I mean, I just think it's cool that like she's this Comanche warrior, and just her cunning defeats it. You don't need to.
No, that'd been fantastic.
Yeah, and so the fact that maybe the magic thing was just a rumor, but I heard that too, and I was like, oh man, that kind of that like all my enthusiasm for that movie. I'm like, it just went.
Yeah, it's because like Predator, like with Alien. I am so diehard about Alien that I will forgive the bad ones, like Alien 3, Alien Resurrection. Give it to me. Predator, I can't do it as much. I don't know why, but it feels like there's. When there's a bad Alien, I feel like there's enough like the same thing when you go to see like a D movie, you're like, this is terrible, I love it, give me more of it. But I feel like with Predator, it doesn't hit that same way.
It doesn't. When there's a bad Predator movie, they're just bad. The Predators was okay. And that's the one where they send the guys to the game reserve. I'm like, okay. When I saw it, I'm like, okay. When I first saw it, I'm like, it's okay, but it's grown on me over time. The Predator, the newest one where they're like the fugitive on the planet, That was horrible, and I don't know what they were thinking. That's the one with the kid who is autistic and gets the
I
mask.
haven't seen it.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things. Like I'm like, oh well, crap, that sucked. I did not like that movie at all. And strange enough, I think it sounded like that movie was supposed to be something completely different, and then the executives came in and changed a bunch. But
I
they were
believe it.
showing like because it's supposed to be a fugitive predator gets loose on Earth, and they team up with the predators to catch. I'm like, well, that sounds cool. And they showed a photo of these guys in predator costumes and like military, like human military army fatigues, and like
Huh.
they're sitting on this armored carrier. You can find this photo online still, and it's like you have the guys who are in the movie, the other military guys, and these two predators like these army fatigues. So they actually team up with the predators, wear army, human military uniforms are gone. I'm like, that looks cool, and that was completely taken out of the movie. I'm like, why? Why would you?
Huh.
That looked cool, and you completely ruined it. And so I heard the movie was something completely different, and the studios came and was like, no, you need to add this, and make it
Of
crap.
course. Yeah.
So, because the guy who wrote that, Shane Black, I think his name, was in the original Predator. He
Yeah.
was an actor in the original Predator movie. Yeah. So, I don't know. Aliens. The funny thing is yeah, some of the other Aliens movies are saying, so I'm like, okay, I kind of, I I really like Nukes and Hicks, and when they killed them in the third movie, it was kind of unforgivable. But I understand that the girl just wasn't coming back. I don't think,
Mm.
and I don't think Michael Bean was either. But I know the girl played Newt. That's the only movie she ever did. So I don't think that was even a possibility to get the same that girl that played Newt. I mean, you could have
Yeah.
changed her, have another actor play her.
Mhm.
But I understood why they didn't. But they just like so callously killed them off in the beginning was like it was just like wow. And then
Yeah.
so kind of lost me. Couldn't do it. Like the first two, and that's it. I just watched the first two.
That's
Yeah.
fair. Well, we had started off our show with our normal icebreaker, and then we spent about 30 minutes talking about creative workflow, and we spent about the last hour talking about our
Nerd stuff.
So maybe our podcast editor will split into 2 episodes. If you're a podcast listener, you might be getting 2 shows out of this. So
Yeah. We talked about workflow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I it's funny. I would be curious to talk about if you have one next time or one of these, like talk about stages you take to create your own comic. Like if you were to create your own
Mhm.
comic or create your work, like where do you start? How do you
Yeah.
start at like the actual process? Because I do it a little differently than other people, and I know every artist I meet has their own sort of like little tricks and stuff. Like
Yeah.
like I thumbnail. And like some will write a complete script. My friend writes scripts and then thumbnails. I don't write scripts. I do. So everyone has like weird ways of like producing things. I just find that kind of interesting.
Well, I have a good question getting back on the subject. And I know we only have a few minutes left. Let's see how y'all answer this. If you are working on something, and of course we know that, you have an idea for a comic. It's going to take you a long time to produce that comic. You're going to put hours and hours and hours into it. So my question is, and either one of you can answer because I think this crosses the threshold for writers and artists. What do you do to keep the inspiration going on a particular story or comic? And that this is a workflow question because this is very important to workflow because like me when I was working on Trumps and other stuff that I've worked on. Some days you come in, you just don't feel like you just don't have it. And then other days you're like, oh, Trump's, or whatever it is. And you had an idea throughout the day and you can't wait to get it down, But what do you do personally to get in that headspace to where this is all encompassing in your mind? What do you do?
For my Galilean, since I spent 6 years on that, maybe more. That 6 years is a guesstimate because I actually made 2 kids books in between making that book, so I took time off from that. But I think it was 6 years something. That was a personal story to me, so that was the investment in there. Like I really wanted to get this done. And strangely enough, the incentive, because I actually did Goblins once before. Like there's an old version where I did the whole book. Took me 7 years. Did it once before, and people had a hard time seeing my art or reading the book just because I wasn't artistically there yet to pull it off. And so when I decided to redo all 300 pages over again, people like, really? And I'm like, and this time I feel like I've executed it. But it's just much more of a personal story to me. That was my motivating factor for that. But during the time, I mean, I was getting ideas for other stories, and I even took breaks from Galleons and drew other pictures just for fun. I mean, I would take breaks from it and like draw pinups or something else, but I didn't start another comic story per se. I would write during that. It was a few stories I was writing down when I was working on that, but I don't know, it was motivation. It became such a habit of working in that book that I actually found that when the book was finally done, I actually was kind of depressed for a few days because
I
I
always
didn't have
am.
that routine to come to anymore.
You
So
stand atop. You stood atop the mountain alone as a god.
yeah,
Cloud is
yeah.
only you.
And now you're just like, well, now what do I do?
Yeah.
It's not there anymore. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad it's done. I mean, I actually got the last 2 issues in, so I mean, this is my big like stack of books, and it's like all thick of how many books there are.
Yeah.
I'm getting it made in one book. That's what Kablam is helping me with. But yeah, I mean, it's cool to see it done. But now I'm like, I will say I'm one of those people I like to draw and stuff, and sometimes I procrastinate when it comes to like thumbnailing or creating. And that's my own personal thing. Like I just want to sit down and draw that cool stuff
Yeah.
and not have to worry about figuring it out. But you eventually have to sit down like, okay, I figure out what this is all is, but I just want to draw the stuff. So yeah. Yeah, that was my motivation. I watched a lot of things, man. I got like a ton of ideas and stuff that I've been working on here and there. But you just, all of my projects, I will say that when I've done, because I've done other books before, I did one called Dead Left Out, 60 pages and stuff. I just have this habit of like finishing what I'm starting. Even my other friends say like, yeah, you just never get. I'm like, yeah, I know, I finish it. And so, which is weird because sometimes you're finishing it and like, well, God, what if this doesn't sell? And I spent all this time and it doesn't, but you got to eventually finish it. And I will admit that once you finally finish a project, there's that sort of crack high in finishing it. So there's something exactly kind of thrilling to finally see it all complete and put together. So that's another huge motivator. It's like, dude, but when I see it all complete and on the shelf and people reading it, that's going to be awesome, And so that's a huge motivator for me.
Oh yeah.
So,
for me, it's a mix of like Pavlovian training myself, and also doing what Brandon Sanderson calls brain breaks, where I have my own ritual and that I'm very regularly in, and that I know that if I take my laptop into a coffee shop and I sit up there, I am supposed to write, and so I do. But in order to and so that will easily me putting words on a page. But sometimes if I'm not feeling that particular project, or if it's just I'm not clicking where I need to click, I'll never have two projects in the same place, but I'll try to keep 2 or 3 projects going. I'll have like one in writing, one in edits, one in pre-planning. So if if the one I'm writing isn't coming together, I'll switch over, do some edits, and then come back to that. Or if I'll go to the pre-planning one. So I get my brain firing on something, and that usually will be enough to then jog my my juices going back to what I'm actually working on, and knowing exactly like, okay, this is what I want to do from this point.
Yeah.
So taking that brain break and forcing myself to be creative in maybe a different aspect, but still getting that creative thing going. It's just making sure I don't have something in the same place. So I'm not, taking the tone that I would write to write something into writing another thing. But when you're thinking about plot beats or like coming together something, that's going to help you jog the plot beats going into something else, but you're still keeping just that one tone or one voice in your head.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you a scenario where that question came from, and this is just one scenario of many, but there's been a lot of times where I got off of work, I was tired, and I knew going in that this is going to be a page where I'm having to do a lot of no cool stuff. It's going to be all I've got to do an establishing shot. Or I've got to do this other,
Or Talking
transitional
Heads.
thing
Yeah.
that's not, not cool.
No.
And then it's like, well, first of all, I have to get into the mode of this story.
Yeah.
And it's just a few times that stuff like that happens, and you just have to get in there. Sometimes it really is literally comes down to you just having to say,
Mhm.
it's time to do it. It's
Yeah.
time to shuck the corn. Let's
Yep.
do it.
And part-
And you just had to psych yourself up.
Yeah, and part of that Pavlovian training is if you can it works better as a writer, like moving the entire well, I guess if you're working digitally, you can still move like a pad to a laptop or something, but creating a part of your house or like a part of like story where you know that like if you go there, that is work time. So way you know they're sitting down to go to work essentially. Even though you train yourself to approach that in the same way that you approach a day job, and that it is just work. It's just getting the thing done.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, that's kind of like that's I told you
Yeah.
Monday and Tuesdays. Part of that is that. Part of it is because this is Monday. We draw on Monday. We don't game. We don't watch movies. We don't do family time. We don't, we draw on Mondays. This is the day I've got, and this is the day that I'm going to be working on it. And
I just like you coming into your family on Monday. You're dead to me for today.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. If you're a creative person, you do need to be willing to protect your creative time from your friends and family. We're like,
you got to.
You're gonna say
you won't get it.
I mean, if you feel embarrassed about saying I can't have to draw that day, just say you're working. People get it. It's like I can't have to work. This is work.
Yeah,
I know. But it's still almost some kind of hard to convince your family friend that what you're doing is work. But you're drawing. You like to draw. Still work.
Yeah.
And not all of it is fun.
Yeah.
I mean, Quentin was saying, not every page is like a pinup.
Yeah. I like to imagine that when Quentin was working on the copy of St. Martin's in the Fields for Wolf Hunter, and someone's like, "Don't you like drawing?" He's like, "Do you think I like this?"
I don't like this.
Well, I had to draw that twice. that St. Martin's in the Field. So the first time I was like, "Yeah, this is pretty cool." The second time I was like, "Oh man."
Yeah.
Yeah. Try not to do that to your artist, but if you want, try to give them some candy to work on. Like once per page, give them some candy, make it fun.
Yeah. Draw me. There's a few writers I've had to give me that double page splash page, and they're like, well, why? And I'm like, because it's cool and it makes me happy, and I'll draw the rest of the stuff for you.
Yeah.
And you also got to give it, a little bit of a, shout out to your readers. I mean, they like splash pages. People like it waste time. I'm like, no, it doesn't. A lot of when you talk to most people and you ask them your favorite images or pictures in comics, most of them are splash pages because they're big and in your face.
Yeah, I do like if you're doing I get the point of having condensed reading. That's something they brought up also on the Sunday Funnies when they saw how the panels in Wolf Hunter and in Sirens are laid out. Is it's very condensed. With stories like that, if you're doing detective stuff, having condensed storytelling where it's packed together, it kind of makes sense because it's going to be a lot of if you're especially both of these stories use a noir style narrator. But going into the book that I'm working on right now, there's tons of splashes. We want gods are fighting. There is literal sunbeams smiting people.
It's funny. One of my favorite versions, because I've always, even when I was drawing my godlings, you were talking about gods fighting, I was always trying to envision these battles in that and how they would move, and I mean it would be unnatural. And the way the Kryptonians fought in that Man of Steel movie was how I imagined. There was one scene in particular where the Fiona, the female Kryptonian, is on the ground and all these army guys are shooting her, and she literally moves like lightning. You can't even see her move. She goes from like soldiers just taking them out.
Yeah.
And it was so fast. I'm like, that's it. That's how I imagine them moving. You can't even see it. They're just boom. And Dragon Ball Z was really actually good at that. They're getting that sort of over the top, they're blowing up mountains and stuff. That's how I see gods fighting.
Yeah, and to bring it back, one of the things that for keeping yourself motivated for entering workflow, in general, as demonstrated in the last hour, you have to be passionate about it and be excited about it.
Yeah.
Because if you're getting into any sort of art form for the money, unless you plan on being Christian Bale, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's you do this because you love it and you want to contribute
Yeah.
to the art. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things like, we wish the money was there, but it's not all the time. So if you, like I said, if you're into this, like, man, I'm gonna get rich off this, sure, there's always a possibility.
What are you talking about? I've been doing really well.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a new car in my garage from.
That's what I was just thinking. He's like, look what comics bought me, that new Ferrari, and
yeah.
I wrote Wolf Hunter because I want some dad going through his World War II documentary phase to pick it up and like, oh, that's neat.
That's neat. Yeah, especially when he's in the comic shop with this kid. Like, what do I look at? And it's like, he looks, he's like, hey, what's World War II? Ooh, yeah.
It's cool. It's fun. I want to have someone think it's cool. Like I think other people's stuff is cool.
Yeah,
that's it. It's cool. This has been a show on Tuesday. We have been your hosts. Our social medias are scrolling at the bottom now. We are all on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter, where I mostly do Destiny type stuff. Yeah, and it's mostly there to promote my Twitch channel. And we will be back next Tuesday talking about Clip Studio and Manga Studio, and kind of doing more of a more focused craft style episode. It might turn into a 2-hour course. It may turn into people messing around with hotkeys. Which, speaking of workflow, learn your freaking hotkeys for your program of choice. It actually helps a lot.
It helps a lot.
Yeah.
Control Z.
Yeah, if most people are like, I can't do all the clicking. Well, if you learn your control buttons, it becomes much easier. We'll have another group here on Wednesday to talk about Wednesday stuff, and also on Sunday for Silver Sunday. And then we have a special guest coming on April 5th, so be on the lookout for that. But until also check out our Kickstarter. It's going on right now. Just go to Kickstarter.com, type in Wolf Hunter. It's the first thing to pop up. We are closing in on our next stretch goal. So please buy comics. If you want there to be money in publication, you got to put it there.
Yeah, that's right.
So we appreciate it. We would not be able to do this without you. So thank you all for hanging out and buying our comics and chatting with us and watching our podcast after the fact. We will see you next week. And until that time,
make my Silverline.
Where's the thing?
We just said,
hey, I'm Alex Saviuk, and I just want to let you know, make mine Silverline.